Hello, my name is Joy. I'm an alcoholic, and my sobriety date is August 29th, 1974. We're here today to review the fourth step. These are suggestions that are right out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So let's begin with the first step. And that's important to do because without that you won't be able to go on with the rest of the steps. And we do all of our steps in order. So let's just review the first three steps quickly and then we'll move right on to the fourth step. Step 2 is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. When I was new, I had a real problem with that word sanity. I didn't know what they were talking about. Were they saying that I was insane? Did they say I have a psychiatric diagnosis? Also, the situations like when we would drive our children in the car when we were under the influence, or when we would drive the car when we were too angry at our spouse, if you're codependent, or when you would hide bottles, or hide the checkbook, or try to prevent harm. Often codependents go out of their way to troubleshoot situations that they know will be detrimental to the alcoholic, when in essence, that's the core of the codependent, is to try to prevent harm to the alcoholic when they're on a self-destructive path. It's very difficult to step back and just let that person do what they have to do to get to a point where they may see their own issue. So when we refer to step 3, it's important to take that with another person. And most of us sit with another person and we recite this prayer. It's on page 63 of the Big Book. God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could last abandon ourselves utterly to Him. I make it as simple as possible. And what I tell people is just get a piece of paper and let's just fold it in 3 columns and make that your format for what you're going to be writing. In the first column, you're going to include all the people that are closest to you in your life. Your spouse, mother, father, sisters, brothers, your grandparents, your children. And you may want to just use separate pieces of paper for each one of these people because you'll need space here to write out your resentment. Institutions. Maybe the institution of marriage is something you have a resentment toward. Sure, let's name some more institutions.
Government.
The government?
It might be a real institution like a college.
Oh,
Yeah,
college.
That's a good one.
School. I guess that could be a place too, right?
Yeah, that could be up here.
Loans, like banks.
Institution,
No,
banks. Okay. I think you all get the gist of how you identify people, places, and things that may have given you trouble in your past that you may have a resentment connected to. Principles. What kind of principles are we looking at? Maybe the moral principles, maybe monogamy is something you have a resentment toward. Maybe honesty is something that you feel that you don't need to be all that honest all the time, whereas this program talks about a lot about honesty. Racism, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So what we do is we write out the causes. And maybe Mr. Brown told my boss about padding the check, my expense account, and tattled about my drinking or using. And you can write out examples of why you're angry at Mr. Brown. And so with just this one example, and I'm going to go to another example from my own inventory and explain it again, but I'm going to go over here and I'm going to talk about self-esteem, how it affects me. And so we get all of this out, every single part of your resentment out in this second column. And then we go over here and we look at how it affects you, how this resentment has affected you. And we're going to look at self-esteem, how it affected your self-esteem. And when you look at the self-esteem issue, yeah, it made me feel badly about my work performance. It made me feel less than. And so when you look at your self-esteem, you're going to write out, it made me feel less than. It made me feel not a good worker. It made me feel like I'm not good enough. Security. You're going to write out how it affects your security. You're going to say, well, you know, my job's on the line. How it affects your security is that it may take my paycheck away. I may lose my house. I may not get another job or a better job, or this pays well and I'll never get that kind of money again. Ambitions. Well, I don't know why I should even try anymore. I'm on my third warning, and they'll probably fire me anyway once they find out I'm an alcoholic or a drug user. So your ambitions go down, and maybe your work performance isn't going to be up to speed. And personal or sex relations, well, I certainly don't feel very sexy when I'm about to get fired from my job, so it definitely affected that. And it affected my personal relationships because I can't stand to talk to Mr. Brown again, and I'm looking for something to get him on so that I don't look so badly. And I personally don't like the secretary of the boss either, and the boss isn't a favorite of mine. So yeah, it's going to affect my personal or sex relations if you really look deeply. Something that came out of my inventory, and something that really surprised me. And the thing that really surprised me was that when they told me to write down all the people in my family, I wrote down the mother, the father, the brother, and I had resentments connected to them. My brother physically abused me when I was a child. He was a bully, he taunted me, he teased me, and he did that for most of his life. I didn't realize the sexual abuse was what it was until much later in life. So I had to really look at that and understand my part in that. That surprised me. I had kind of buried that quite a bit. And I put down the cause and how it affected me and how it affected my special personal or sex relations, because I found it difficult to be confined or hugged by someone or controlled by someone, because he could outpower me as far as him being bigger and stronger. So I had a very difficult time with hugging. When people in the program would come and hug you, I just kind of cringed, because I thought they wanted something from me, because that's the experience I had as a kid. So yeah, it affected my personal and sex relations deeply. The thing that shocked me the most about my fourth step was the fact that I had written down my maternal grandmother. Well, when I was 7, she got me in a corner somewhere, and she proceeded to tell me that I needed to take Jesus into my heart. It was very important I live in His way. And she had me put my hand on her Bible, and she had me pray with her. I thought God's expectations were her expectations. And I really felt like not only did I fail her expectations, but I also failed God too, because I wasn't living in accordance to His laws and rules. I borrowed the God they were talking about because I didn't have one of my own. I had that old God that was that 7-year-old perception that was a punishing God that was going to send me to hell for everything I'd ever done. But in the rooms, what I heard was more of a rational idea of how we turn our will and life over to higher power. And even though it's frightening sometimes to put that down on paper, sometimes it gives you a sense of shame that you participated in something like that. It's important to put it down, because when you put it down on paper and then eventually in your 5th step talk to another person about these shameful ideas and maybe shameful incidences that happen to you, number one, you're going to find out you're not alone. You're going to find out that many of the human beings in your circle of recovery have experienced similar situations. And what I found out, which was probably the most healing part of it, is that my problems were very, very average, and that I was not uniquely different or uniquely bad, but that I was just average. And that was a big relief for me, to tell the truth. Some of the shameful things, or some of the things that we thought we were going to take to the grave, as many people refer to, are those things that you think you're going to take to the grave, thinking that you're so unique and so different from anyone else. Oftentimes that's the very thing that will get you drunk or using again, unless you put it on paper and put it down and tell another human being, someone you can trust. Picking someone as your sponsor, or maybe someone that you're going to be doing your 5th step with. Very, very important that you pick someone you trust. Okay, we're going to look at each and every relationship, each and every example in your 1st and 2nd column, where we're going to refer back to the cause and how it affects you. And then we're going to look at my mistakes. My mistakes, or what was my part in that. So in the example in the big book, down below Mr. Brown and Mr. Jones, it talks about my employer. How he was unreasonable, unjust, overbearing, threats to fire me for drinking, and I padding my expense account. So in your part in that, what you're going to look at is that, yeah, he was right. I am an alcoholic. I was very poor at attendance. I was late some of the time, or I would call in sick and say, I'll be in later. I have a doctor's appointment. In reality, you were trying to nurse yourself back to health. Dishonest, yeah, I padded my expense account. I added drinks on there that I shouldn't have added on because I was entertaining clients. And I drank during meetings, out on trips when I was traveling. You want to look at where were you selfish, dishonest, and you're going to be writing that out. Where were you selfish? How were you dishonest? How were you self-seeking? Well, you expected your employer, you expected your boss, your co-workers to cover for you when you weren't there. You expected them to go out of their way to protect you, to lie for you if given the opportunity, and how you were frightened. And what fears drove you to what behaviors. Because remember, fear is the core of every single problem and situation that we have in our recovery. Example of, I know a woman in a social situation, and she seeks out people that have things that she wants. And what I mean by that is that she's she's not in recovery yet, but she ought to be. And she's self-seeking to the point where she chooses friends carefully because the friends that she seeks out are the people that could entertain her in their beach houses or their vacation homes or on their boats or so forth and so on. But what I think is most important is that the selfishness on her part is not what she can bring to a relationship or how she can be a friend to you or how she wants to be a friend to you, but what you can do for her. Well, you could say, for example, what is your part in being molested by your brother? What would be my part in that? Well, it happened maybe when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, something like that. We were both kids. Maybe part of that was his curiosity, being an older male. Did it continue into intercourse? No, it didn't. Was it part of maybe every childhood experience playing doctor? Maybe my sponsor or the person I'm giving my inventory to had similar experiences. This is pretty common among young people, young kids. And the fact that I carried it this long and I still had a resentment attached to it, what I had to say to myself was, yes, maybe he did something wrong, but my part in this is that I can't afford the luxury of carrying around resentments into sobriety. And it's not that I need to forget what happened to me, but the obligation I have to myself is that I need to forgive the wrongs of others for my own benefit. So, say you were molested as a child. Maybe you were molested by an older adult or maybe one of your siblings, and you have a very difficult time understanding what your part was in that. Well, you had little or no part in that. You were just a child. You were a youngster. Sometimes, and a lot of women will say this, is that they enjoyed the attention, the special preferential treatment. That's the truth in it. And the other truth in it, sometimes it felt good. And that's something that's very shameful too. But you have to realize, yes, you were a victim. And you were a victim of a crime. And it wasn't your fault. It was not your fault. If you carry this through adulthood, and you keep the shame, and you keep the secret, that's what your part is in this situation. I've heard inventories and stories from many, many women that horrendous abuse as children. These are the kind of things that professionals can help you with, and I would encourage you to look to seek professional help, especially if these situations happen to you and they're still very problematic. That's why a lot of my resentments were because people either rejected me or abandoned me in some way that I perceived, and so I reacted it with maybe anger or hatred, but the reality was that I was fearful that I was rejectable, or I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't acceptable. And that's huge for me in my inventory. And Colin, why I have them? Oh, why do I have these? Well, the fact that I was adopted, I also always felt inadequate, and my perception was that I was never good enough or never could measure up to other people. So that's one of the whys I have them. Not measuring up. And because I was adopted, I've always felt somewhat apart from, I never felt a part of, especially my own nuclear family. I didn't look like my mother, father, or brother. He was adopted too. Probably children from divorced homes or alcoholic homes have those kinds of insecurities and fears and feeling of rejection because one of the core people of their lives left the home, left them. Or maybe loss of a parent. Maybe your parent died early on. All right, let's talk about sex problems. This is a little separate inventory that we do, and they'll be showing this page up on the screen for you to refer to. And essentially it's done in the same 4 columns, but in a slightly different format.